Story 1. The Face. I know this sounds completely unhinged. If you told me this, I'd assume you were hallucinating, but I promise, everything I'm about to say is the absolute truth. It started about a month ago. I had just moved into a new studio flat after a sudden job loss. The place was affordable, tiny, but immaculate, and frankly, I was just happy to have my own space. The first night is when I felt it. As I was about to fall asleep, I got this powerful sensation of being watched. You know that static charge that makes the hairs on your arm stand up? That oppressive quiet that hangs in the air before a big storm. It felt exactly like that. I flicked on my bedside lamp and scanned the room, but there was nothing, just the normal, mundane shadows of my few pieces of furniture. I chalked it up to anxiety from the recent upheaval in my life. But the feeling didn't leave. The next night, it intensified. After switching off the lights, I had this bizarre compulsion to look over the side of the mattress. I have no idea why. I'm a grown woman. I outgrew my fear of monsters under the bed decades ago. But that night, some instinct insisted I had to look. Hesitantly, I leaned over and peered into the darkness underneath. Nothing. Just a few dust bunnies and a stray pen. Relieved, I let out a little laugh at my own foolishness and rolled back over to get some sleep. But as I turned, my eyes caught a reflection in the wardrobe mirror on the opposite wall. I swear my heart stopped. It was a face. It was faint, half swallowed by shadow, but partially illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the blinds. It was pale, still, and staring directly at me from beneath my bed. I shot up, slamming on every light switch in the room, my heart pounding against my ribs. When I looked again, there was nothing there. I grabbed a flashlight and checked everywhere, inside the wardrobe, behind the curtains, under the bed again. I turned that room inside out. I didn't sleep a wink that night. The next day, I told myself it was a trick of the light, that I was just exhausted and seeing things. I was so wrong. Every night after that, I would see it. The pale face, always under the bed, always motionless, its eyes wide open. It never moved while I was watching. It just stared. It became a twisted ritual. I'd get into bed, feel its presence, glance underneath, see it staring back, then pull the covers over my head and pray for morning. I tried telling my sister. She told me I needed a vacation and some therapy. I couldn't blame her. But last night, everything changed. I didn't look under the bed. I was too paralyzed with fear. But around 3 or 4 a.m., I felt a distinct weight press down on the mattress beside me, like someone was slowly, carefully climbing in. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't even blink. Then I felt a puff of warm air on the back of my neck, followed by a whisper. "So you finally stopped looking under there?" I screamed and threw myself upright, swinging my fists at the empty space. The bed was empty. I turned on the lights. Nothing. The closet, the bathroom, under the bed, all just silence and shadows. But then I saw it. In the mirror. My reflection was there, sitting bolt upright in bed. But on the floor beneath my bed in the reflection, there was that same pale face. And this time, I swear to God, it blinked. Story 2. The Offer. 2 years ago, in the autumn, my wife and I bought a small homestead in a quiet corner of Iowa. It was late September, and by mid-October, the weather had turned cold and gray. Our furnace and water heater ran on propane, and we had a small propane fireplace that could save us a fortune on our heating bill. So on a bleak October morning, we drove down to the local farm and fleet to get a new tank. As we stood in line, debating tank sizes, a man in his early 60s began staring at us intently. He walked over to a display of work gloves, fumbled with a pair, then turned back to us and started walking in our direction. I noted his clothes were a bit too new, his beard a bit too neatly trimmed for a typical farmer. To my dismay, he got in line right behind us, not at a normal distance, but so close I could feel his breath on my collar. I was deeply uncomfortable, but in a small town, you try to be polite. I turned, smiled, and said, "Morning," hoping he'd get the hint and take a step back. He didn't. He launched right into a conversation, piggybacking on what he'd overheard. "Weather's turning nasty, And this line is a real killer, followed by a story about having to drive his cousin to a specialist in the city in a couple of hours. Then, the questions became more intrusive. Where are you two from? Where'd you move to around here? How old are you guys? Luckily, we were called to the register before I had to answer the last one. For context, I was in my late 20s, and my wife was a few years younger. We could easily pass for 21 or 22. I politely said, "Have a good one," to the man, and stepped up to the counter. As the cashier, a teenager, explained their pricing, the man behind us erupted. "I can't believe you're charging them that much for a tank," he yelled. The kid calmly explained it was the standard market price. "They're a young couple just starting out. Can't you cut them a break?" At that point, I told the cashier the price was fine, better than other places we'd checked. The man kept muttering under his breath, then his entire demeanor shifted. In a syrupy sweet voice, he leaned in and said, "Hey, I have a 100-gallon tank at my place I'm not using. I'll give it to you for free, you just have to come with me to get it." My wife thanked him, but politely said no. He pushed, "Are you sure? My place is only 15 minutes from here. I've even got a smaller backup tank you can have." My wife declined again. "We have to go now though," he said, "before I have to leave for the city." That was the inconsistency we didn't catch until later. I held up my receipt with a firm smile. "No thanks, we just bought this one." Annoyed, he slapped the work gloves he was holding back on the display and stormed out. The cashier made a joke about strange old-timers to break the tension. We chuckled and went outside to the filling station. Just as an employee came out to fill our new tank, the man pulled up in an older model Ford Ranger and parked right next to us. The truck bed was full of junk, tarps, empty chemical drums, a disassembled tent. He got out and started again. "You should really get a second tank. Save you a trip." Before I could speak, he added, "If you don't want to leave your car, just one of you can ride with me. The other can follow." With every word, I noticed he didn't have a local Midwestern accent. His friendliness felt hollow. I said again, "No, thank you, we're fine." Then he said something I'll never forget. "Come on, this is a small town. People help people. I'd never do anything to harm a nice young couple like you." Just then the propane employee walked over and told him to get lost and stop bothering customers. That seemed to spook him. He got in his truck and sped off without another word. As we all stood there, the employee pointed out something we hadn't seen. The truck had no license plates. We still go to that farm in Fleet, and a few months ago, the same employee asked if we'd ever seen that guy again. He said he shows up every fall, always when the store is quiet, and only ever approaches young couples. Story 3. The Presence at the Castle. Kaisersberg Castle is a 14th century fortress in Germany's Black Forest, with various legends contributing to its reputation as being haunted. It's open for tours, but staying overnight requires special connections. In August of 2018, when my friend and I were 17, my parents arranged for us to spend a night there during a family trip. My mother's relatives in Stuttgart have ties to the Historical Society. Wisely, my mother said nothing about the castle's reputation, knowing it would terrify us. We were completely oblivious to the stories. Late that night, my friend and I were in our room, a small chamber in one of the castle's towers. We were watching a movie on a laptop. Instantly, and without any trigger, a negative, heavy energy filled the room. It's hard to describe without sounding cliché, but it was a palpable sense of impending dread, the kind that makes you want to stare at your screen and not look at your surroundings. We joked that the place must be haunted because we both got goosebumps at the exact same moment. The chill was simultaneous and unprompted. A little while later, with my eyes glued to the movie, I just knew something was watching me. My friend then pointed to a spot behind a dresser near the door. "I'm getting really bad vibes from that corner," she whispered. "I don't want to look over there." It was strange and specific. What we both felt was a presence, maybe a shadow or a silhouette, or perhaps nothing visual at all, standing in that corner. Here's the truly bizarre part. Without speaking, both my friend and I could describe the presence in the exact same way. It was a young woman with dark, severe hair. The feeling she projected was intensely negative. sadness mixed with a cold anger. We couldn't physically see a thing, yet we knew precisely where she was and what she looked like. The most unnerving part was the feeling of being watched by something that did not want us there. By the time we acknowledged her presence and our shared mental image of her, my friend and I were huddled together on the bed, frozen with fear. My parents were just in the next room, and a single shout would have woken them, but we were incapable of making a sound. We just lay there, a mix of nervous laughter and sheer terror, desperately trying to avoid making eye contact with the presence. I'm not sure if she was angry at us specifically or was just a perpetually angry spirit, but we eventually just blacked out. We couldn't make out any message. It was just an overwhelming intuition that this young, dark-haired woman was in the room with us. The next thing I remember is waking up to daylight. The next morning we packed and left in a hurry. I told my parents about our night, and they looked deeply unsettled. It was only later that my mother told us the castle's primary legend. It involves a baron's daughter from centuries ago who vanished under mysterious circumstances, with one version of the story claiming she was walled up alive by a jealous suitor. I've found very few historical sources that go into detail, and I've never read another person's account of staying there. But what are the chances of a shared experience like that? Is that kind of telepathic image of a spirit common? The story we knew nothing about seems to align perfectly with our experience, which is either an incredible coincidence or proof that something is still lingering in that castle. My parents, for their part, experienced nothing. They fell asleep early and slept soundly, though my dad did mention that the eyes on a portrait across from their bed seemed to follow him whenever he moved. Story 4. The Chase. I walked alone down a rural stretch outside of Athens, Georgia today, and I will never do it again. I've been followed before and had men ask if I want a ride in busy cities, but that happens maybe once or twice a year. Today, on a quick 15-minute loop with my dog, 4 separate men offered me a ride. Others waved from their cars, and I was chased by a gaunt-looking man. I was terrified. The few small shops I passed were all closed for Sunday. I was literally the only pedestrian for miles. This man was sitting on a bus bench when he spotted me in the distance. He started yelling, "Hey! Hey you, come here!" I ignored him and quickened my pace. He stood up, grabbed a tattered backpack, and started jogging after me. I scooped up my little dog and broke into a dead sprint. The man started running faster, too. I veered off the road, ducked behind a rusted, abandoned pickup truck, and hid for a moment before plunging into the dense woods beside the road. I just ran blindly through the trees until I stumbled back out near a remote gas station. The whole area looks like a set from a horror movie, a perfect hunting ground. If I had run into someone malicious in those woods, they could have done anything to me, and no one would have ever known. There were 0 people, 0 cameras, just derelict houses and endless greenery. That's why I was so freaked out. If that man had caught me, we would have been completely and utterly isolated. I have no idea why he was chasing me. Furthermore, one of the guys who offered me a ride, a clean-cut guy in a new-looking sedan, literally did a U-turn to drive back in the opposite direction after I said no. It was like he had turned down that road just to intercept me. Another girl might have even trusted him. The other men who offered rides and the man who chased me were all significantly older than I am. I have no idea what was going on, but the sheer number of men who approached me, culminating in a chase, makes it impossible for me not to feel like something was orchestrated. I may be cynical, but I refuse to believe that many strangers were just trying to be helpful on a deserted country road. Story 5. The Figure in the Yard. This happened back when I was about 16, so some of the details are a bit hazy. My family had a beagle named Rusty, and one night I took him out to the backyard to do his business. I went back inside, planning to let him back in after a few minutes. Soon after, my younger sister and I heard him barking like crazy. He often barked at nothing, so we weren't too concerned at first. A minute or so later, I went to the back door to call him in. Rusty was never eager to come inside, so I was standing on the patio, calling his name a few times. Suddenly, my sister started screaming my name from her upstairs bedroom window. She was yelling for me to get back inside right now. I've never heard her sound so terrified. I ran back in without a second thought, locking the door behind me, and rushed to her room to ask what was wrong. What she said chilled me to my core. She said she had seen someone standing in the shadows of the yard, almost directly behind me, while I was calling for the dog. It was then that I remembered I had accidentally left the back door unlocked. We got our mom, who grabbed my dad's heaviest maglite flashlight, and we went to the back door. We managed to get Rusty inside and then scanned the backyard with the light. The door to our garden shed was wide open. This was strange since we rarely used it. My sister then added that earlier she thought she'd seen a faint light flick on and off inside it. What I believe happened is that someone broke into our shed, and when I took the dog out, the noise must have alerted them that someone was nearby. They must have been trying to sneak away when I was standing there calling for Rusty. To make things even creepier, a few days before this, my sister had sworn she saw a man cut through our backyard and disappear behind the shed. I don't know if it was the same person, but it's certainly possible. I've never had anything like that happen before, and I wanted to share it. The feeling of a stranger invading your private, safe space like that, and getting that close without you knowing, is a type of fear that stays with you forever.